we are multidimensional beings, right? This is what we are being reminded of. And as we start experiencing these changes of timelines, we kind of understand that as we are all part of source, consciousness is somehow, our consciousness and the consciousness of all that is somehow like a shell encompassing everything that exists, and all versions of ourselves, because we all have infinite versions of ourselves, and we have infinite versions of our galactic selves, and every single version of ourselves that exists has infinite versions of themselves.
I would like to welcome you all to this Quantum Realms Roundtable discussion brought to you by Quantum Healers. Today, we will be discussing timelines, timeline collapses, shifting timelines, jumping timelines. We will be bringing you stories through quantum healing sessions, among many other exciting questions we will be exploring. But most importantly, how it serves us. How does it help us to have these experiences and timeline shifts? And what does it mean for humanity having these experiences? Albert Einstein once wrote, "People like us who believe in physics know that this distinction between past, present, and future is only stubbornly persistent illusion." Time is not absolute, despite what common sense tells you and me. Time is relative and flexible. So reality is ultimately timeless. So I am going to introduce our panel today, and I'm going to start with Harry. Harry, if you can give us a hi. Harry is a quantum healer from Prescott, Arizona. And then we have beautiful Pamela Erilyn, a spiritual teacher. She does wonderful music, and she is just an amazing channel. So I know I'm going to post links below. I can't do you justice, Pamela. Any of our quantum healers. And then I have Aura Moldovan, also a quantum healer from Stockholm, Sweden. I have Donna McMurtry, quantum healer and author. She's written amazing books, from Atlantis to also quantum healing itself. If you'd like to connect to any of us, the links will be in the description below. So I would like us to start this roundtable with some session experiences with our clients. And I know that, Donna, you have some session stories for us. Where would you like to start on this amazing timeline of this roundtable?
Well, so I had this client, a young woman, she was late 20s, that came for a session, a quantum healing session, specifically because she had this inexplicable, strong urge, desire, almost like she just had to move to Hawaii from Denver. And she didn't understand this inexplicably strong urge to move to Hawaii because she had a wonderful relationship to a chef in Denver who had an established restaurant. You know, she had a lot of family and friends and a job, this whole wonderful life in Denver. So she's like, I don't know why I have this such a strong pull. Like, I just have to move to Hawaii. And which, you know, is a pretty interesting issue. So we get into the session and come to find out there is an alternate her living in Hawaii in another timeline right now. And this alternate her, she's very connected to because they both have these crossing paths of desire. So the her living in Hawaii really wants a good relationship, really wants a lover with all of the benefits and all of the attributes that this client currently has in Denver. And then this client that's living in Denver wants some of the same things in life that the alternate her living in Hawaii currently has. So it was this interesting crossing of wires. And it was just a simple matter. Her higher self said, you know, differentiate between the desires of the two and really look at what you each have. And fixing it was simple. But that was one of the first really strong reality crossing of timelines that I had encountered, other than, like the strange little things that happen in our day-to-day. What's that effect called? The Mandela Effect. There's all of that kind of stuff. But to see somebody that actually had a strong pull on their life from an alternate timeline was interesting.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing that beautiful story. I feel like most of us, when we connect, it's like the mirror reality that we're in. When we connect to someone, it's always like we see something in someone else and we don't realize we have that within us, or we see that that's something that someone else has, and we recognize that we want that as well. We see that, and it's like we're an example for other people, and you see that quality and you want to become that. And
sometimes I wonder if when we have this soul recognition with total strangers, and we kind of know, okay, we've probably known them in another life or been family with them. Sometimes I wonder, is that just going across timelines, as much as it is having another life with them? Is that kind of what you're asking?
Yeah, I think we're so connected that sometimes the lines are just a bit blurred. That we feel that connection where we don't always understand the connection. We feel the pull and we feel that desire, but we don't always know or understand where it's coming from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want well, I don't know if I'd call it fun, but a very odd example of what's been showing up really strongly for me with other timelines right now? This is sort of terrible, but sort of funny. I have two Uncle Bobs. So I have an Uncle Bob on my side and an Uncle Bob on my husband's side. And for some reason, this has been going on for like 5 to 7 years. I keep thinking they're both dead. So the Uncle Bob on my side of the family, I could swear I have memories of like 10 to 12 years ago of him dying. And there's 10 kids in that family. He's the oldest, and some of them have passed on. So, there's reasons for this, but he's not dead. And recently this came up again. We were somewhere and I said, well, when Uncle Bob passed, and my sisters are like, what do you mean when Uncle Bob passed? He's not dead. So now the Uncle Bob on my husband's side, this also recently happened with, I have visceral, strong memories of his wife, Aunt Diane, being alone and without him. And she finished a quilt for her sister, for one of my kids. And, I was thinking, well, good, that took up some of her time now that she's, kind of alone, these types of things. I have strong memories. Well, my sister-in-law just texted like 3 days ago and said, Uncle Bob died, just died. I mean, it's weird, right? Like I have these strong memories of people passing and they weren't. So that's my story.
Well, I think it's exactly what we would call the Mandela Effect, right? Because that's exactly what happened with people in South Africa, because Mandela was our president, but a lot of people can swear that, he passed away. He never became president. He passed away in the prison. So that is the basis of that. But what a crazy story. Thank you for sharing. I do enjoy the little things we miss. Like, for example, when I set up the Zoom session, I know for a fact I looked at every single one's time zones, and I know for a fact I wrote everything down. And then when I went back to the message, no times were written, and I'm like, I know that I wrote those times down. So I was just left so confused. Like, timelines and time zones are already so confusing, and I was just left baffled. Does anyone have anything to share with Donna with regards to the story?
Okay, yeah. I was thinking also about Stan Lee, because this happened to me when the man that was writing Marvel and made all the superhero comics and everything, I knew that he died in 2015. I have seen all the Facebook craziness about his death, everybody mourning him. And then I think he died in 2019 or something like that. And it was all like, again, deja vu, right? It was so weird, but I was so sure that he had passed. And I was talking to the people that I knew back then about his passing. And then he passed again in a few years later, 3 years later or so, 4 years later. And that was just super, super weird.
I just want to comment on what Donna was saying, that I also see like, it's interesting how the one person helped herself from another version of herself, you can say, another timeline, and with that desire. And a lot of times I think people are pulled to something, and some pulled to another timeline that they know that they need to raise their frequency and raise their vibration and consciousness to reach a certain level, and it's kind of calling them. So I like to use it a lot, and it actually came spontaneously in a lot of sessions as well, is using that future self that has already accomplished it, already has that vibration, already has that state of being, the consciousness, and allowing that future self to advise the person and bring that understanding into, okay, what do we need? What is the best thing? What's the next step that I need to do? Because again, it's the best if that person can help themselves. And I don't usually even call it timeline. Just tell that future self that already has accomplished it, already has it, already knows what there's to do, and already has the wisdom of beyond of going through that process. So it's really nice to bring that kind of to help, to have the self help the self from that place, which I think, again, I don't necessarily like to call it timelines as far as future, because it's not really future. Everything happens at the same time, but it is about that part of you that already holds that vibration, already holds that level of consciousness that can help you pull yourself into that space, into that timeline, if that's the case. So I also wanted to mention, it was kind of funny because I was like, I wondered, what else? Because I had a couple of ideas of what to bring in, and then just today I had a client session about timelines, and that was kind of a serendipitous in its occasion. And what I noticed too, a lot of things that happen when you talk about timelines is people get a little too confused about it. Especially people, I know Pamela's like, yes. People, especially who have a lot of psychic abilities and are very intuitive and can tap into their possible timelines, they do get a little overwhelmed. They're trying to intellectually tap into different things and like, oh, I want that timeline, and this timeline disappeared. And then and they get really tangled in the aspect of trying to choose and trying to bring in the best, and they involve the ego, but I want this, my desires are this, and really get really convoluted. It's a good word to use in the quantum healing word. Very convoluted with themselves, and then they lose themselves in that aspect, and they lose like, okay, what do I really want? Is this the right thing? Should I do this? And they get confused. So I really like to bring it back to, and with the slide I did this morning, it's coming back to your energy, to your consciousness, to your vibration. And it says like, and if you notice that, we get that. I think all of us get this in our quantum healing sessions, so much feedback. It's always like being your highest vibrational self, being your highest expression of self. And when you do that, you will automatically align yourself with higher and higher, you can say, vibratory expressions of the timelines that are possible for your life, and bring that in. So instead of start focusing because it can get so confusing, because it's only millions of possibilities, and from all those possibilities there's potentials, and from the potentials there's probabilities. So we're talking about thousands upon thousands, and people get really lost about it. So bringing it back, and like we always say, is hold your vibration, hold your essence, be true to yourself, don't get confused, go back to who you are, align with your highest self, with who you are, and then you be able to bring the best timeline within yourself. And another good example I had for that is a moment that came to me just a few months ago, and that's actually very typical of I think 2021, is people come who have no clue about anything spiritual. Like, that's it, I need to get things done, I need to open myself up. And they come and they open in an enormous way, a very powerful way. So this lady came to work on some patterns in relationships, something very, you could say, conventional. And within 3 or 4 sessions, we were already like opening up to her galactic self, which was complete shock to her. She had no clue about her Andromedan self and living Andromedan lives and all that kind of stuff. And she was opening so fast, so quickly. I was like, she's gonna, completely change time, change professions probably within the month. And within a couple of months, she already joined my certification program for integrative quantum healing. And she already doing that, then some other like she's totally boom into this field, completely changing timelines, also changing relationships. So her life is completely changed within 6 months. In a very helpful and healthy way too. I'm not saying it's not a disruption in a harsh way, although some of it is hard because you have to let go of the old you, the old self. But most of it was very healthy, like renewing relationship with her family that she wasn't talking too much, becoming herself, becoming okay with her sexuality, identity, all of those different things that as a person she was like shooting in all directions and doing it really well. So that was really exciting to see. And again, in none of those cases I actually name it as timelines, but it obviously is the case that she is shifting timelines and completely changing her life to a completely different trajectory into where she's going. So that's what I wanted to share. So I'm sure everybody else has some ideas and what comments you guys can make on it. I'll be happy to hear. Yeah, Pamela.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because that was my question to bring to the roundtable. I work with people daily in regression, and particularly with looking into what I call the concordant records, which is the book of life relative to your now. Like our now is so important to me in my particular line of work with people. And I find this similar experiences when clients come to me and they're not really prepared mentally or emotionally in particular for a spiritual awakening. And then they go through, say, a quantum session or a regression of some type or a past life review, what have you. And then suddenly, not only are they experiencing, the pain that they're trying to integrate in their own present, but now they're looking at another reality and they weren't prepared for it. So my question to you, Harry, and to anyone who wants to, you guys are all such fabulous and such mastered quantum regressionists and healers, and so many people here today have mastered this. What do you do? What is your take on this when the client feels overwhelmed and feels like, well, now I know that, and that doesn't make me feel much better? It's like their ego just kind of takes over. What do you do as a practitioner to guide that client when it's just too much, that knowledge?
I mean, I can answer, but I want to let other people have a chance.
No, go on, Harry.
Okay, so I think it's more about the process of integration, moving on from dissonance to integration to cohesion. So that movement into the greater self, I like to call it. So it's not necessarily the highest self, because that's sometimes it feels for people way too high. So I kind of created a middle way of the greater self, which is that part of us that is connected to the universe, to the wisdom of the universe, to everything that is, but not necessarily as high and as intimidating for a lot to get into the highest self, which is so kind of something that they can do in the middle ground and have them train in that and getting used to getting to that space and start making decisions in life from that space, from that place of like, okay, now I'm connected, I'm at ease, I'm at peace, I'm connected to my eternal self, to the wisdom of the universe. It's not, I call it just the first threshold of the higher self. So, but that actually is really easy to get to. It's really easy to get to. People are, again, these days, I mean, all of you can say that it's so easy for people to get to that, like connecting with their higher levels of consciousness. So get into that space and start making decisions from that space, from that state of being. And so like, okay, how do I approach this relationship? How do I approach the situation that I have to deal with? And start making decisions from that space. So they start to feel that there's greater growing congruence between what they are going to be and what they are right now, because there's a big disparity in that space, and bringing them into a feeling, okay, I have control over this. I can manage this. I can manage and reach for those answers with greater ease on my own, or with the help. That's okay, with the help of professionals. But I have where to go. And I like to help them develop that's why I like the quantum healing, is I like to do a succession of sessions, not living to one big quantum healing session that leaves them like, what now? So I like to, it's more like, you can say, spiritual soul coaching, bringing them to that space so they can integrate it and move it forward. And again, and get a sense of cohesion between within themselves. So that's, again, and I like to have them develop and quickly learn how to get into that higher guidance within themselves, or develop a very quick and easy relationship with their spirit guides, whatever guides that they're connecting with the most, that can help them so they can refer back to it very quickly. So I recommend automatic writing or just daily meditation. And I do it myself too. I like to connect daily. Well, I want to, but I don't always do it daily. But do that, and to get the guidance. Okay, what am I to do today? What do my clients need today? What do I need to focus on today? Because every day is something different. So getting that constant realignment with the self, with the higher self, so they are feeling more, okay, I'm tuning in. I'm not feeling that they're moving away, because there's always that high after a session. They're feeling awesome. They're open for 3 days, and then they start to dwindle back into their more regular vibration. So I like to keep it up and do weekly sessions for a little bit, so that keeps them and moves them in a better way. Okay, I'll give it the floor to others.
Donna?
I love this question, Pamela, because I get clients as well who are just so overwhelmed by whatever level of awakening they're at. And it becomes scary and almost not helpful to them for a little bit. And I think my default answer right now is for them to help manage that overwhelm is, because what it is an overload of responsibility. All of a sudden they're learning that they do create their life, that they have created this life path, this plan. It's kind of like this, all of a sudden you're 100% responsible for everything that you are now and everything that you will be. And, I think a lot of people like the idea of not being that responsible for everything, right? And so, first of all, to let them know that their higher self and their guides and whole lot of support has their back. That, yeah, they're responsible. If they want to take control over a lot of this stuff, they can absolutely do that. Also, they have these default things built in. The higher self has their back. But then for them to focus on frequency management is what I tend to go to. And by that, I mean choosing whatever feels best to you from moment to moment, making the choices to take care of your body well, making the choices to take care of yourself, your relationships, but really that focusing on what feels good and knowing that that is going to plot the right path across timelines, through life, between reality bubbles, whatever it is that we're talking about. It's really as simple as that. The highest and best path is the path that you're most passionate about, the thing that you're drawn to the most, the thing that you feel the most strongly in the depths of your being. That's going to keep you on the right path. So yeah, thanks for asking that question, Pamela. I love that.
Aura, did you want to say something or add something?
Yeah, I was sorry. I was thinking that I absolutely agree with what Donna has said and what Harry has said before. And also, I usually just tell them, I'm trying to make things very, very simple by just telling them that it's as simple as their gut feeling, their intuition. They don't even have to think about a higher self. They don't have to think about something that they don't understand. Just whatever they feel in their gut, whatever they feel intuitively, that is the safest way to go with. And we all have our intuition, we all have our gut feeling, and it's just as simple as that. And also something that Harry has said earlier, to be in our highest version of ourselves. I'm also thinking that like the highest version of yourself is actually such a simple thing. All you need to do is in silence go within yourself. You don't have to go somewhere outside of yourself. You don't have to go somewhere, I don't know, out in space or to some other version of you. You just need to go within yourself. And it is within the heart space, within yourself, breathing, just listening to your heartbeat. That is all that is needed. And that's where you find the highest and best version of yourself. That's where it starts from. Yeah. And that's also like the middle path, because I've been thinking earlier about the human growth hormone, right? What it means to grow, to become better, the highest version of yourself. And the human growth hormone is being activated when we sleep, but also during intensive exercise. So it's all about the middle path, not exaggerating anything, but always doing what feels good for you and what you know that you can do, not taking crazy measurements that are way outside of your reach. Yeah.
I'd like to say something that kind of brought me the thought of like, it is difficult for people, very difficult, because they are confused. And I think if you put it in now as the conversation about timelines, they are kind of, I think, oscillate. They go back and forth between the two timelines, the ones that they have been to, which they're comfortable with, and the one they suddenly are opening up to. So I think that there's a constant back and forth pull that is usually so that kind of brings them back into fear. But what if? And I'm giving an example. For example, like I don't want to leave this relationship because no, I love the person, they love me, and because it's usually that's the hardest ones because they're close to the heart, and they're the most difficult one to have conscious choice in it or intuitive, because your intuition is very muddled at that point. So it's hard one. So I think that part is, I think people just need, I think in short, people need a lot more support in that part in which they are awakening, switching timelines. They need a lot of support, a lot of constant perspective sometimes. Just helping them with giving them perspective, giving them, reminding them to trust themselves, reminding them to be in the moment and to be in what pulls them, and Donna was saying to be in the moment, to do what feels good, and to support themselves and be a parent to themselves and be gentle with themselves in the process, because people are very harsh. That's something I always encounter. People are very harsh on themselves, and not accepting of mistakes and misgivings and failures. So it's also, especially in that part of transition between the two, people need to be a lot more forgiving and knowing it's not a one way and that's it, you're done, because we do sometimes fall back into old patterns. And we know how that feels, a lower vibration of some sort, or that we are comfortable with. So it is a tricky path, to go back to what Pamela was saying. It is tricky, but I think most important, people need support, love themselves mostly. So.
That's a big one, Harry, because we do tend to stay with what is known, right, and what is comfortable, and a lot of the times it is staying in that fear factor because we don't want to step out of our comfort zone. Pamela, do you have anything to add on that?
That's such a big can of worms to open.
Wow.
With that, and in such a great way. We think about so many advances that quantum healing has made us more aware of and has given us access to. We could possibly, I would really love to determine this from the point of science, and I personally can't wait until a scientist explores, researches, and shares with the world their findings about which portion of the brain we're actually tapping into when this happens. Mm-hmm. And how can we maximize that? Many scientists who follow entanglement theory have a lot of ideas about our brain and what part of the brain actually lights up and is in the most use based upon brainwave technology. So there's a lot of ideas going on. There's a lot of research that people are embarking upon. I'm super excited, but what most excites me is not just the emotional component of how we can live a better life, but the opportunity that these findings could present to science when we connect our emotional progress, which is the epitome of spiritual growth, with being able to evidence that by watching our brains and determining which portions of our brains Does this heal a certain portion of the brain? Could this remove brain lesions? Could this help multiple sclerosis patients? These are things that, could this heal ADHD? These are the things that I am interested in, I and the A team. So when I look at this, I'm kind of looking at a different perspective. I just want to ask all of you, what do you feel? I want everyone's opinion here today, if you don't mind. What have you observed about which components of the brain are actually being utilized, possibly healed even?
Wow. I'm not sure about that, because I think that where you are coming from a whole different perspective, I'm more visual, and I'm like with aura, keep it simple, right? So when I look at what you just explained, I kind of look at a spiral, and I know we see time as linear, like past, present, and future, but I'm kind of seeing it spiraling, and it's like, okay, are we progressing? Are we learning? And then when we meet someone, on what level are they? Or does it mean we're going to have to go back on that spiral, or they're going to come up to meet us? That's kind of how I see it. And it could be applied to what you're talking about as well. Like, what do we have to do vibrationally, energetically, to raise our level of awareness and consciousness to heal our body and mind? What do we have to do to become in perfect alignment or a perfect resonance, sound frequency, that could mean we can eliminate those things that are in disharmony?
I'd like to talk a little more about the physical location and healing and all that kind of stuff. But I think the way I was explained, the way to perceive the brain and is more of what the computer is for the internet that we're actually using right now, which is beautiful. But it is not the source of information and change and actually data bank. It's not. It's actually just a conduit. And seeing that the computer, it's still processing things, it's still going through the processing unit so we can see it, feel it, and know what it is and hear it, but it's not the source of it. So it's not where it is happening in the brain, because that's only the conduit portions of it, where it is being processed. Okay, but it's only the middle way. It's only the connecting way. It's not really where the source of the thing, which I perceive that the mind or the consciousness is the source of the real change, and obviously our energy system, and then it just translates and works and conduits through the physical brain, physical body. So it's when those changes happen, it doesn't happen in the brain. It doesn't get, not all knowledge. Obviously, if you really think about it, and I'm Pamela, you know it best than all of us, that all this information that we can tap into in the universe, in Akashic books of life, past lives, all that stuff, it's not stored in our physical brain. We have access to channels to receive other information. So a lot of the healing, a lot of the consciousness, a lot of the knowledge is coming from somewhere else. So it's just a conduit. So finding where it exactly part of a brain is like, I think it's not that important. It's just what is the consciousness process that is taking place. That's the key thing. And there's a fascination. I like it too, how it translates through the energy system level, consciousness level, into matter, from the energy level into matter, into manifestation. And as I said, manifestation of disease when energy is blocked somewhere, and all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of part in that, but it's not I find it's not really the main point.
I was thinking that it's exactly like Harry said, that it's not something that is specifically located in the brain, but that it's more of combined, a co-working of mind, body, and soul together. That we are not just physical beings, we are not just energetic beings or emotional beings, we are a whole, and we need to work on all of these terms together, all of these different levels together, but again, level sounds wrong, and have them co-working in order to achieve the changes that we need to achieve. And quantum physics teaches us that we need the minimum amount of energy to change something, and that change affects everything, absolutely everything. And I think this was where in quantum entanglement, they were making all kinds of experiments where they were changing a tiny, tiny particle, and then a particle that was related to that particle, they put it as far away as possible. And as they changed the one particle that they had, the other particle changed automatically miles away. I don't know how far it was away, but it also changed. So this is how we are affecting our reality. And as for medical stuff, I have been suffering for panic attacks that I could not explain. So there was something wrong in my brain physically, right? And with the quantum healing session, I asked, is there anything I can do? Why am I having this panic attacks? And it turned out that it's something from a past life related to the way I am empathic and how empathy murdered me on the battlefield in another life. And it was related to my anxiety attacks that I had in big masses of people. When I was around many, many people, I would feel what all of these people were feeling around me, and that caused a panic attack. But as soon as I knew the root of that panic attack and why I had it, I stopped having it. After that session, I never had it again. I never experienced it again. And it's something that I had since I was a teenager. I think it's, yeah, I mean, I was a teenager when it started. And that means that something must have changed chemically in my brain, I guess. And yeah, it's the same for many, many things. I can only speak for myself right now because I don't really have this very tight contact with my clients where they really tell me exactly what has changed for them months later. But just personality changes or fibromyalgia, that disappeared also after quantum healing sessions. I am not having this pain anymore that I used to have on a daily basis in my body. So things change. Now, I have other crazy questions of how we are moving, if our consciousness is moving from a body to another, like if it's moving from, as it jumps timelines, this is what I was thinking back in the days, that it moves from a damaged body to a healthy body on another timeline. But somehow today I meditated on this subject and I had the understanding that as we are consciousness, we are source, right? And we are omnipresent, we are omnipotent, we are omnipresent, we are, I wrote it down, we are multidimensional beings, right? This is what we are being reminded of. And as we start experiencing these changes of timelines, we kind of understand that as we are all part of source, consciousness is somehow, our consciousness and the consciousness of all that is somehow like a shell encompassing everything that exists and all versions of ourselves, because we all have infinite versions of ourselves and we have infinite versions of our galactic selves, and every single version of ourselves that exists has infinite versions of themselves. It's something that is just, I cannot put it together in words, but somehow we are flowing through these infinite versions of all that is. Oh my God, I cannot put it in words. I'm just trying to, we do it when we decide to come back to ourselves, to get within ourselves, take a moment, breathe within ourselves, make necessary changes. We analyze the situation, we understand the situation, we see all possibilities by going within, and then we start choosing, making conscious choices of choosing a certain path that we take. And this is how we start moving from one timeline to another. And again, I find that the word timeline is a little bit maybe dated, because time is not linear, and I have a bit of a problem resonating with the word itself. It's more like, I call them time-space constructs, or maybe dimension. Or one of my questions was, what is the difference between dimension and timeline? That's one of my questions. If anybody can maybe answer that. I have an example. Like I've been to Madeira in Porto Santo on the island, and it's a desert island. But when I've been there, I was seeing it a little green, lush in my head. I was seeing palm trees everywhere. I was seeing mystical creatures, dinosaurs, dragons everywhere. And this is just how I was perceiving the island as I was being there. And then out of nowhere, I was speaking to a person that lives there who told me without me asking him that this island used to be green thousands of years ago. So I was perceiving the island the way it is in a parallel dimension. But is there a difference between dimension and timeline, or is it just like tomato, tomato?
I think it would be great if everyone just gives their perspective, and then maybe we could come to a conclusion. Donna, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I would say it's all a matter of frequency, the difference between dimension and timelines. And yeah, I like a different word instead of timelines. I like reality bubbles or focus of reality right now, because for me, it's all about where is my consciousness focused? And that's going to be in a different little bubble or moment of time. You know, every time that I open my eyes, I'm going to have a different focus of consciousness, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas dimensions, I would say, is all about frequency. That's the very simple, complex answer. I was just reminded everything that you guys, all the wonderful concepts you guys have been introducing here of how some of the ancient cultures, like the Mayans and the Toltecs, taught that every time you blink, every time you close your eyes and then open them again, our consciousness is so powerful, it literally recreates us and everything around us. So, you know, when they were teaching hopping timelines or consciously changing timelines or reality bubbles, they would literally use that, close your eyes and open them again, you know, and then using your focus, using the power of your will and all that kind of stuff. Then you could focus into the reality bubble that you wanted to, or the timeline that you wanted to. But yeah, that's it. That's all I got.
Thank you for sharing. I think that was a really, really nice story, insight. I haven't heard that before. I'm going to go try it now. So
very cool. I want to say one more thing about that, because it's interesting because I like it, Donna, because it's like I like it when you tap into the same thing, because my guidance is always say like a focal point of consciousness. That's where we are. So it was identical. So that was beautiful. And again, I do want to continue on Aura's mention of words and how they sometimes are dated. For example, also dimensions is also kind of dated. A lot of my guidance is always the saying they call it densities. It's just, again, as you said, it's a frequency shift, and they just call it density. At some point, you shift into a different density, and that's it. It's not necessarily you pass a threshold, something, poof, you're in a different place. It's more of a continuous frequency change, as Donna was saying, and same for the timelines. It's more of the parallels of self. I just call it parallels of self in different frequencies, because it's all about frequency. That's the source of it. It's all about frequency and vibration. So once we shift to frequency, it's just a parallel seven. And I think it brings to, especially if you talk about timelines, it's the idea of free will and what we make choices every moment of every day that we can shift and change and play with it. Another choice has opened up, another parallel self has opened up as a potential. And I think when we talk about jumping and moving and merging into timelines that are in our highest good, it's about also bringing that kind of the constant play between free will and destiny, or more like the blueprint of life, of what you have decided you want to experience in this lifetime, that has to be experienced, first of all, as a merging point of all your parallel universes, or at least some of them, that want to experience a certain part in order to accomplish what needs to be accomplished in this lifetime. So bringing that knowledge and knowing that it's a constant play between our conscious choice and what was kind of we chose on a higher level to experience, and allowing it to play out in every possible combination. So it's a constant, and that I think gives that kind of sense of like the parallel selves, that the endless parallel selves that have made that choice of yes or no, and both, and you made both those choices in every moment. So I think it's a beautiful way of seeing the timeless in that way. It's just continuous choice of parallel selves, and in a continuous relation to your choice of life and lessons in life.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like when Aura was explaining about like what the difference is between timelines, so you gather the information, and what you have and what you know now, you can make your certain choices and say, this is the potential path that I want to go down. But then again, there will be another part of you, I feel, another self that will take a different route and will go and play out that experience or that reality. But you will experience something completely different. But I've also had many conversations with people who say, or listen back to their quantum healing sessions, for example, and they say, you know, I've grown so much since that session, I don't think that information applies to me anymore. I feel like I've changed my perspective and my views, and that's it. You know, you move on, you grow, you gather more information, and then you say, okay, what direction do I want to take this now? Which I find is how I would explain timelines, right? But I want to take this now to, like, for example, dimensions as we're changing, because obviously, or densities, there's so many words and word plays we can use here. But as we are consciously growing, and we know it's not just us that has a consciousness, it's our planet as well, would we say that the collapsing of timelines, because we've heard that, and I want to take it to collapsing of timelines now, if we collapse timelines and those people that are experiencing different, like for example, Donna with people passing away in the family, and now they're not, like the shifting of realities, the shifting of timelines, is that our way of collapsing timelines, moving from the 3D to the 5D? Now that's something to think about. Right, so I thought that was fascinating. So that's what's happening. And Harry, you said earlier, we move a bit, we come back, we move up a bit, we come back. And is that what we're all doing collectively? Or how can we explain the collapsing of timelines and how people are now seeing a more beautiful Earth and how we are moving into that new Earth?
I believe that I presented an interesting argument to this particular phenomenon with my teaching the 411 on ascension. You can find that on my YouTube channel still. It's several years old, I think, by now. But the way that I've always seen dimensional experiencing, if you want to call it that, I relate to the rest of you that I like density. I like understanding frequency, and the word dimension doesn't relate to me because it applies hierarchy and lower and higher, as if we're moving from third and fourth and fifth. And I remember there was a time back in 2015 when I made the video, the 411 on ascension, people were saying, well, I went from 3 to 5, or now I'm in 7, and it became like such a focus. I don't know if you guys remember, you know, in that time frame, and it was so confusing to me as a teacher because I just didn't relate. I don't know how you guys felt about it, but I just couldn't connect. So I made this video about dimensional experiencing, that's what I call it, and parallel realities. And people said, well, what happens when you ascend? And I'm like, really? You're just like a Russian doll, and you're already that little baby doll in there. Even though that's what you perceive as little, it's actually huge in the macro. And when we start looking at macro and micro, it's sort of like being on Earth and looking up at the stars, and people are saying, find North Pole, but the damn globe is spinning, right? Everything is moving. You know, and science is like, find the North Star, it's always here. And astrology is like, here, you're always here, and this is where you're born, and here's all your characteristics. And I just could never personally connect in my teachings to these things. Aries nodding. So it looks to me like a Russian doll. Like, we may think something is little and it's inside of us, but it's actually huge. It's bigger than we can possibly comprehend what our soul is. Right? In order to understand dimensional experiencing, or density experiencing rather, you need to understand the macro of how big you actually are versus how little you actually are. So when you think about what you said earlier about the experience of, okay, we're going through these painful timelines, and then suddenly some of us are waking up and experiencing really beautiful, powerful things where we're just, not even experiencing, say, the effects of corona or something like that. I personally have one way that I really experience it. And then I have another way that it doesn't even affect me at all, and a complete peace about it. And that seems to be based upon the Russian doll phenomenon. So what I mean by that is there's a little me, and I think that little powerless me is like, oh my gosh, I can never be with my fiance, da, 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 because she's in Ireland and all these kind of stuff. This little me saying that. So then I'm experiencing that. My visa's completely on hold. Everything's on hold. But then there's another me that is over here in this timeline that's like, corona doesn't affect me, and it doesn't. I've never gotten sick. I don't see people wearing masks in my town, even though it's a mandate, and no one cares if you rip your mask off or whatever. I go into my doctor and she's like, can I take my mask off? I'm like, if I can. I don't care. You don't care. Cool. So like, I'm just not affected like at all in that realm of me. And that's a version of me that's it's like a Russian doll. There's layers of me there experiencing in the same particular timeline, but perhaps with a different density experiencing, lower frequency, higher frequency. I don't care what you call it, but I think you know what I'm saying, right?
I love the excitement that's coming out of you. I immediately, when you started describing the Russian doll, I'm like, the little me, that must be the Matrix, right? And the more you go back to the little me, the more you're enforcing the 3D matrix, right? And possible fear-based beliefs. And the more you expand out on the Russian doll, and the more you step into the power of you and truth and light, everything else falls away. Sorry, I just had to share that. That's just what came to me in a rush of like, I need to share that. Aura, did you want to add something too?
Yes, I wanted to say that also this word of timeline collapsing, I would actually call it the coming together of timelines, because it's not a collapse, but it's a gathering of all the infinite versions of yourself that you are, and becoming aware of all the crazy infinite versions of yourself. Also this morning, I went down to the little me, thinking, oh my God, how easily influenced I am. And I'm actually a person that questions everything. But this morning I got influenced by someone's opinion about something else. And I was like, but no, what? So everything is always there. And I think this is also the beauty of timelines and the beauty of them coming together. So not collapsing, but coming together. We get to see that there are infinite versions of us, and there are infinite versions of truths, and there are infinite versions of individuals. And I was thinking of, again, I'm coming back to the Mandela Effect, because my husband and I, we come from two different universes. Or this thing, I don't know if you've seen it, I prepared it, the one with Coca-Cola. I remember this since my childhood with the tilde. I have no idea what the hell this is. And then in school, when I studied product copyright stuff, and we learned the whole logo history of Coca-Cola. I realized that this is the only one that has ever existed. The other two never existed in this reality, ever.
Could you explain the difference on the Coca-Cola? I'm not really seeing a difference in any of them.
This one here has a tilde, number 3. Number 1 has the dash, has a dash right between themselves. And this one has the dot right here.
I see.
And the one with the dot is the one that has always existed. But I know for sure that as a child, all the Coca-Cola trucks had the tilde, and all the bottles and everything. I don't remember any of the other two versions at all. And I know people who drink are heavy drinkers. And I asked a friend of mine, I asked her which one she remembers. And she said the tilde. And I told her, can you please look on your bottle? And she was like, what? Since when is there a dot there? And I said, I don't know, but it's always been there, apparently, at least in this universe, it's always been there. Or I was talking to my husband about the crewed moon landings, and I know of only one from where I come from. And for us, it was a big thing that we landed on the moon once. And I was wondering, why the hell did we not do it again? If we made it once, why did we not keep doing it? And then 2 years ago, I was speaking to my husband, and he was saying that, what, but we landed 6 times. And I said, no, we didn't. What? So it's, again, we realize that we are all so diverse and we all have so many different truths. And I mean, there are as many truths as there are individuals, and there are as many truths as there are infinite versions of each individual, I guess. So I think this is also something that we get to learn and just experience the infinite vastness of all that is and everything that we are. Yes, sorry.
So that was the main question I brought for all of you today, was examples where you've had what we're calling collapsing timeline experiences, or, you know, stories, session stories, or awarenesses of that, because I haven't had much of that. I understand the concept in the way, and I'll tell you what I understand it as, and you guys can maybe correct my understanding. To me, collapsing timelines is, especially with certain frequencies that only have a certain number of possibilities, like I'll use the example of nuclear warfare. Okay, there's only so many ways that can go if we started using nuclear weapons, right? There's not a lot of possibilities for how that can play out. And so collapsing timelines would be, to me, where we played out all the possibilities of any certain choice point or any certain happening. That's my understanding of it. And it tends to be what I would call lower frequency or more negative frequency things, because by their very nature, they only have a finite number of outcomes. They always end, whereas higher frequencies tend to expand possibilities or expand your choices. And so it seems like that the higher in so-called frequency that we are, the more timelines there are available, or the more ways things can play out. So yeah, I'd love to hear examples of collapsing timelines, or maybe other explanations of it.
I just want to make a quick comment. So there's a difference between, I think we just need to clarify, between collapsing timelines, and converging timelines. Converging when they come together, and collapsing when they just fall away, right? I think that's what you were mentioning as collapsing, Donna, as they fall away and seem to become less and less relevant, and just, like, as you said, play themselves out. I think from what I'm perceiving, again, I'm just going to talk in the abstract and on the concept level first, is that once we start moving into certain frequency, the things that are really becoming further away from our frequency, from our density, just seem to fall away as a potential. So as humanity overall are raising their consciousness level, their vibration level, those possibilities and potential, as Donna was saying, of, for example, nuclear warfare, are starting to fall away as a potential, because it's just not going to happen, especially when you raise your frequency higher and higher. So it really is about going back to what you said before, even that Donna, is about a focal point of consciousness. So if you are starting to focus on this kind of level of frequency, those that are really, really far away from you just seem to dissipate. They still exist on some level, but they dissipate away from your potential, from your probabilities. So I think that's generally because, you're just going in a certain direction. There's only that much you can see as a potential. That's all I want to say about that.
For me, Donna, I just, you can go really deep and you can get really complicated with these things. For me, I try and have fun with it. I will, and I notice, and there is no benefit, but I try and notice the changes, and then that's it. It just simply is, right? There's nothing you can do about it. It's not like you can go back and, because it's gone, your timeline's changed. Like I would, for example, be watching a video like this, and you'd be wearing a green shirt, and then there'd be like a transition, and you'd be wearing the same shirt but would be a different color. And then I would rewind the video, and now you're wearing a different color shirt, right? But a second ago it was a completely different color, if that makes sense, right? So things like that. Or I'd watch a postman out my window and deliver post to that house. He'd walk straight past my house to the next door neighbors, but my post arrived through the door when I checked the next time I went to the front door. And I'm like, but the postman never walked down my house. So little strange occurrences like that, which I find fascinating. I'd walk past someone and then I'd recognize them because I'm very visual and I do remember faces. And then I'll turn the block and I'd walk past the same person. And I'm like, but I just walked past you. So I think things like that is really fascinating, and it does make you think, but it can also make you overthink and overanalyze things. And that is where things get complicated, and we kind of get confused and muddled, because what does all of this mean? Because we always want answers, we want to make sense of things.
I have another question.
Mm-hmm.
Is how do you guys all see consciously using this? Because I see it as when we become aware of different timelines available or different reality bubbles or changing those, it's kind of an ability, right? Kind of like telepathy or anything else. So what do you guys see? Like, why are we becoming aware of this? Because there's always a reason. And how could we use this consciously?
I just want to say that it goes back to what we started with, and saying that to avoid the muddleness of choices, and just really trying to be like, I need to be everything that I need to be in this lifetime, everything that I'm supposed to bring to this world, everything that I am, and just like trying to focus on that. And that brings it to instead of getting lost in the possibilities, just focusing, let me be all that I can be, that all that I'm supposed to be, and be aligned with it. And that's much easier to grasp.
For me, being aware, going back to the Russian doll analogy, and being aware of the part of me that is somehow seeing a fearful reality, and then the part of me who at least wonders about the potential of a more powerful reality is so important. Wonder for me is the greatest tap-in as a mystery school adept and hermetic alchemist, because we use wonder, and have been for thousands of years, to bridge the gap between something that's horribly traumatic and even a potential of something neutral. You don't have to make these huge leaps for something. Say if you're experiencing a trauma or a potential of a trauma, you don't have to have the capacity in your mind to feel like you need to be aware of a potential of something that's beyond your grasp. The only thing that you could stand to consider is just, well, I wonder, is it possible that there's something I don't know about why this is happening? Is there something that, if it's not better, it could at least be neutral and a great learning experience? Just the next most believable step in universal law, we call that the universal law of specificity. When you get intensely specific in a way that you actually believe that you can manage both mentally, emotionally, and physically, the spirit is actually going to use your brain and your body as a tool. And while we're all aware, of quantum entanglement and quantum physics, and we can all agree as practitioners of our field that none of that's happening in our head and our brain, right? It is affecting the brain. It is affecting the body. Our thoughts affect our emotions, affects our body, affects what we say, affects our outcome and our actions thereby, in response to such either positive, negative, or neutral outcomes, right? So I, in particular, am very fascinated if science were to pick this up a little bit more, and I feel that it's very necessary for science to look deeper at how this affects our brains, how this affects our bodies in a positive way, the benefits that we're all seeing and we can talk about on the soul level, and how is it affecting our brain? For instance, I went blind. A lot of you know about my experience with retinitis pigmentosa, which is a part of an immune disease. It was a side effect of an immune condition that I have. And everyone said, I'm going to put you through a clinical trial, but chances of you healing from it are kind of maybe 40%. It's big, but not super big. Don't get excited. Well, my big self was like, yeah, bring it on. It's gonna heal. The sources got this. I'm not worried about it at all, you know? And I had doctors take high contrast MRIs of my brain during the blindness and after. And I was also in heavy quantum healing during that time with my colleagues. And it was so interesting, the differences in my brain. Like after quantum healing, my brain lit up like a Christmas tree. And of course, doctors tried to make a differential diagnosis of that and called it white matter disease. They had to give it a name. And they're like, that's why you went blind. And I'm like, actually, that's never been in any brain scan I've had before. You can't prove that it isn't the reason I went blind. But the truth is, you don't know the reason I went blind. You can't scientifically link that. And there is so much fault in the scientific method, so much to be explored. And my brain is still lit up like a Christmas tree. And according to doctors, they say I shouldn't be able to see. I shouldn't be able to do most of the things that I can do in my body because of this alleged white matter disease, which didn't happen until I started going heavy into quantum healing regressions. But it actually, at the same time, that white matter happened at the same time as the healing and the deep recognitions of my soul's purpose and my contracts and things like that that came from quantum healing. So like, okay, so we can't actually evidence it, but there's something there. The brain did something different. And why can't science look at that a little more? Sorry, I got on a rant there.
So I also wanted to share, because of course I tapped into my team, about this. What is the use of this? Why is it that some of us are becoming more and more aware of these possible timelines? And they would only give me a hint. And here's the hint. So I have to do, they give me these hints and then I have to do the rest of the work. They said it's like having multiple browser windows open on your computer when you are researching something for a story. I'll have 6 to 10 browser windows open so that I can compile and pull information to create something new. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of the word picture and the visual picture they gave me as well. Excuse me. I did kind of try to use this, just testing out, this consciously picking a timeline that's in my highest and best. This last week, I went to Claremont Inn and Winery place for 3 days with my sisters. My oldest sister turned 50 and we're all in the same decade. So, she's like ushering all of us slowly into our 50s next. And so we celebrated that with 3 days at this beautiful Tudor style, Victorian, fancy inn and winery. And there was a chef that prepared the breakfasts and the dinners and all this. And we went on a Tuesday through a Thursday. So we knew that there wouldn't be as many people there, but like 2 days before we left, all of a sudden I had kind of this panic moment of like, oh, what if they're really strict about masking and social distancing? And what if they just make it miserable? Because none of us girls, we don't wear masks anywhere. And we just are not, we have no fear at all about COVID. And we just don't like to be in environments where there's a lot of fear and that kind of stuff going on. So, but I had this panicked moment of like, I don't know anything about this place and these people that are going to be there and the people that run it, it's the small me, right? Being like, oh no, what if it's horrible and miserable the whole time? And so I just tapped into my higher self as well as the higher selves of everybody who was going to be present during that time that we were there. And just said, I'd like to be focused, my consciousness focused on the timeline that is the most pleasant, the highest and best scenario, with all the people that end up being there and the way that we all interact. I was just basically saying, I want this timeline. And especially when I'm going with other people, I'm not just choosing for myself, I'm kind of choosing for the people that I'm with. And so it was awesome, you guys. It was like the best experience. Nobody said a word about masks. There was 2 precious men, Dave and Harry, who run this. They've been a couple for, I don't know, like 30 years or something like that. One of them's the chef, one of them's the winemaker. And they took off their masks because none of us wore ours ever, and the other people that were there, everybody was just so pleasant, so kind. It was beautiful. So that's my story of trying to consciously use this as a tool.
Yeah. And I think on that note, maybe we can all go and try and consciously create our new timelines and how we want to create and see our lives turn into something that we feel, it's not, or just change and become those things we know we can be, but doubt, we're in that fear. So let's remove all the fear and become the best versions of ourselves. Thank you all so much for joining me today. Thank you everyone for taking the time out. I know this is going to be an amazing week of celebrating quantum realms, as well as beautiful Dolores Cannon's birthday. A big thank you to Quantum Healers for hosting this. You'll be able to find a lot of quantum healers. It's one of the largest directory of practitioners, if you go to quantumhealers.com, who practice modalities of all kinds, including BQH. And of course, connect to us individually if you'd like to do that as well. Thank you, everyone.